The Sikha we will learn is look at the Sikha Chilek Chof, the second Sikha to Parshas Bereishis. Before I start the Sikha, I'm just going to read a few psukim that the Sikha is about. That'll make it clearer. After the Torah talks about the creation of Adam and Chava, the pasuk says, and I'll read the psukim. Vayivorach Esem Elokim, Vayemer Lehem Elokim. Hashem blessed them and said to them, "Pru urvu milos haaretz v'kivshua." Should multiply and fill up the world, the earth. Conquer it, urudu b'tgas hayom v'eif hashamayim, and you shall rule over the fish of the ocean, in the birds of the heaven, v'chol chaya remeses ha'aretz, and all the animals that are crawling on the earth. You should control them. You should rule over them. Then the pasuk continues. The next pasuk, Vayemer Elokim, and Hashem said, "Hine nasati lechem es kol esav zera apnei asher apnei kol haaretz." That I'm giving to you all the grass, everything that grows, all the seeds that grow on the ground, and all the trees that are there, pre-eights, the fruits of the trees, zora, those that go with seeds, they should be to you to eat. Then the next pasuk says, and to all the animals of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, and everything that crawls on the earth, asher bei nefesh chaya, which has a life, as kol yerek esav l'ochla. All vegetables or greens of grass is for them to eat. That's what Hashem said. That's how it was. Those are the psukim. So Rabbi is going to discuss a Rasha in these psukim. So let's start the sikha inside. Nachdem mit der Torah erzählt wegen der Brie von Chayim Soda zum Brie Soda wie ich der Brie Mashiach L'Maisa Bereishis. After the Torah that tells us about the creation of the animals and the creation of Adam and his wife, which is Chava, on the sixth day of creation, the sixth day of Maisa Bereishis, Kailel dem Dibur von Nebishn Sodom and Chava, also included is when Hashem said to Adam and Chava, Vayivorach, he blessed them, and he said to them, Pruvu, you should multiply. And then he said, Urudubit gas hayom, and you should rule over the fish, etc., and over all the animals. So after that, Shtein and Torah Tzvei Psukim, the Torah tells us, written in the Torah, two Psukim, B'shayches to the Michael from the Adam and Chayes, in connection to the food that Adam is going to eat and animals eat. That's what we said. And it quotes both Psukim. Psukim say like this, Vayemer Elokim, Hashem said, I gave you all the grass, the things that grow, and all the trees, etc. That should be for you to eat. And the next pasuk says, but all the animals of the earth and all the birds, all greens, all vegetables of grass to eat. That means the Eibush is saying that he gave the person the right to eat the vegetable, eat the fruit, and the animals also eat all things that grow. Is Rashi meitig beperushe dem Siyum von ersten Posuk zusammen mit der Aschole von zweiten. So Rashi, in his commentary, quotes from the Posuk the end of the first of the two Psukim and the beginning of the second. He quotes like this, Lochem yeh lochlo, that's the end of the first Posuk, which talks about the human, that Hashem said, I'm giving you all the things that grow, Lochem yeh lochlo to eat. And then he also quotes at the same heading, the next words of the pasuk where it says that all animals and all birds will have also the Esav, the Yerek Esav to eat. Now Rashi quotes these two parts when he's mafarish and explains like this. The Eibishter compared the animals, the behemoths and the chayas, to the food. That means that the person could eat the same food as the animals, and they're both the same in that inyan. And then Rashi continues. Hashem did not allow Adam and his wife to kill an animal and to eat its meat. Oh, they will eat together all grass, all things that grow from the ground. So that's what Rashi tells us. What is Rashi trying to say? So by Pashas learn, the simple pshat you learn, Ados was this that Rashi says that the Torah, the Eibishter, compared the behemoths and the chayas to eat to people. That comes to teach us as Adam to teach us that Adam and his wife were not allowed to eat meat. In other words, the comparison means just like the animals only eat things that grow, so too the Eibishter said that you're only allowed to eat things that grow and you're not allowed to eat meat. The Geraria is mafarish. The Geraria, which is written by the Maral, a commentary on Rashi, explains it like this. Just like behemoths and chayas only eat grass, things that grow, so too the Torah is telling us that, and this is what Rashi explains, that they're both the same. With Adam, he could only eat ace of grass and yerek and vegetables, not something else. I mean, things that don't grow, you can't. Which means he's telling us, Rashi is trying to explain that here we see that a person is only allowed to eat things that grow, was not allowed to eat meat. But as the Levush says, also a commentary on Rashi, he says it's hard to say this is a pshat, and he gives reasons. Number one, by the fact that the Torah compares a man to the animals, how could you learn out from here that you can't eat meat? There are many animals which kill other animals. They eat meat. Just by the Torah saying you should be like the animals, how does that tell you that a person can't eat meat? Animals eat meat. There are animals and wild animals that eat meat. So how does that prove? When sie sagt, Godel zu sagen, and it's very hard to say, as Rashi halt wie die Shite, Rashi holds like the opinion of the Ramban, as Kedem achet seine Gewenke chayes teifes beilam, that before the Adam sinned, there was no such thing as wild animals who killed other animals. But only later, after Adam sinned, the nature changed. And here we're talking about before the Chet. So b'meila, you could say maybe that's the pshat, that animals did not eat meat. There were no animals that killed other animals to eat. And that's the pshat. You compare Adam to the animals. Just like animals only ate things that grow, so to the Adam. Because there was no such thing as animals eating meat. The Rebbe said it's very hard to say. But azach hidush godel, well trasha ergetzu, the pirush ala teire gedar zogen. Oder akalponim ramen sein. You have such a chidush that the animals, there was no animals that killed other animals. No chayas teirfes is something special, something a chidush. It's not something was self-understood. And such a chidush, Rashi would have said someplace. Rashi would at least hinted to it, but Rashi doesn't do that. So therefore, it's hard to say that what Rashi means to say that the Torah compared, by doing that, by the Torah comparing Adam to the animals, is where we know for this idea that a person was not allowed to eat meat, just like animals don't eat meat, because we see that animals do eat meat. The Rom learned the pshat in Hishva from Adam to Chayas. The Rom, Mizrachi, another commentary on Rashi, learned pshat in this that Rashi says that the Torah, the Eibishter compared Adam to the animals, meaning to say like this, a different pshat. As Keshem v'lehuta l'chaya lech l'sa Adam, just like an animal is not allowed to eat a person, kach lehuta l'Adam l'ham mizberi lech l'basara. So too, a person is not allowed to kill an animal to eat meat. That's the comparison. The comparison is not that what the same thing that they eat, we eat. The same way they can't kill a person, an animal to kill a person cannot kill an animal. And that's what Rashi means to tell us. It's very hard to say that this is what Rashi means. From Demel is Chosim and Asefer. Then the main point missing in what Rashi says. Rashi gedarf der Monen, the Misa from Chais Lechel Sodom. Rashi at least mentioned that animals are not allowed to kill a person. Then we understand the comparison. Just like animals can't kill a person can't kill an animal. Rashi doesn't that mention at all. So the main point that Rashi is trying to say is missing in Rashi. Next thing, on the other hand, there's another kasha here. A kasha that the Gurari asks, according to all these pshatim, what Rashi means to say that he compared Adam to the animals, that just like animals only eat things that grow and not meat, a person can't eat meat. So where do we know this idea that a person couldn't eat meat, Adam Rishon couldn't eat meat, is taken from this comparison? Why do we need the comparison for? We know it from the simple words of the pasuk. The pasuk says, this is what the pasuk says: I'm giving you grass. That's what you should eat. The Eibishter allowed them to eat grass. That's what the pasuk says, and from that we understand. As Rashi says at the end, like grass that I allowed Adam Rishon. In other words, this is a chidush that they're allowed to eat grass. So the pasuk is saying that they should eat grass, and the Eibishter was matir, allowed them to eat. This says yerek eisev is starti. To eat grass, to eat vegetables, to eat things that grow, I allowed. But nothing else. He didn't allow anything else, which is basa, which is meat. So just from the pasuk itself, where it says, I allow you to eat the things that grow, That itself tells you that nothing else, which means that you can't eat meat. So why would we need this comparison that the Torah compares the Adam to the animals to teach us that the Adam couldn't eat meat? Then in any case, the Iken, and this is our main question. In Yonah Schapiro Rasha Latera is the Farish Pshutish Mikra. What Rasha does in his commentary on the Torah, he just explains, as he says himself, simple pshat of the posik. Vosi do schwer im Pshutish Mikra, was Rasha kun verentfern mit sein Pirish Hishvelhem Behemis v'chayis l'maychel. What is not understood in the simple pshat of the words that Rasha comes to answer by adding that the Torah here is comparing Adam to the animals, just like the animals can't eat anything else but things that grow, Adam also not. What's the purpose of Rasha saying? What is not understood in the pasuk? Rasha, there's also questions in the words of Rasha. Number one, why does Rasha use a strange, not common expression, that the Torah, the Eibishter did not allow them to eat meat? A signature sipur, which is telling us what the Eibishter did. He doesn't write like a regular style. He should write what the Torah is telling us. The Eibishter said this, meat you should eat, you can't eat. This you could eat, meat you can't eat. Why does he speak about it as if he's telling what the Eibishter did? The Eibishter did not allow them to eat meat. That's a lotion like telling us what happened then. He should have said that the pasuk, not just saying what happened then. She said that when he touches the pasuk, that you could eat vegetables, but you can't eat meat. He should have said, why does he go around about and say, and the Eibishter did not allow him to eat meat? Second question. Rasha is Meisik from Medayik Ader Isra Odom Ishte is Lohom is Beri Belechel Boser. Rasha adds, and is Medayik, that the Eibishter didn't allow Odom and his wife to kill an animal to eat meat. Und nicht bekitzer bistome, if it means Posher, he didn't allow them to eat meat, he should have written very simple, very short and simple. He didn't allow Adam and his wife to eat meat. What does he say? He didn't allow Adam and his wife to kill an animal to eat the meat. But the fun is mashman from here, it seems as Achilles Bosse von Mesa Meileo's mutter, that it was allowed for Adam and Rishon and Chava to eat meat from an animal that died by itself without killing. And that's what seems from Rashi. And in order 8, the Rabbi says that's mafurish like that. It says clearly in the Rom, and we see from other places that that's take. It's not like the common understanding that Adam and Rishon was not allowed to eat meat. From Rashi, we see that Rashi holds that Adam and Rishon was allowed to eat meat. He just was not allowed to kill an animal to eat meat. What forced Rashi to say that in simple pshat? Where does it say? From the pasuk it says you can't eat meat. Where does Rashi get this that you can't kill to eat meat? You can't kill an animal to eat meat? Another question. So why does Rashi have to repeat and at length? At the end of the Rashi, he says, but all grass, all vegetables, they will eat it all together. That means the man and the animals will eat together. He already said before that the Adam can't eat meat. So why does he have to repeat, but you can eat vegetables again? The Torah says clearly that the Yerek Esav, which is the vegetables or the greens of the grass, is to eat for the person and for the animals. What adds by the Rashi adding the words at the end, but the grass, the grease, they will eat together. Then weiter. We're not finished with the Rashi yet. Weiter is Rashi Mamsh. Rashi continues. When the children of Neach came, which means after the Mabel, they came the children of Neach, Hitel and Boser. Then the Eibishter allowed them to eat meat. Rashi brings it here. Shenema, like it says, Kol Remesh Asher Chai. Bosik there by Neach says, the Eibishter after the Mabel told them anything that crawls, anything that walks on the ground, and all the animals, Kayerek Esav, it's like the grass, the green grass, Sheitarti la Adam Rishon, that I allowed Adam Rishon to eat that. So now I gave you everything. Now you could even eat meat. That's what Rashi brings here. Now, the first question I want to ask, we have a rule that Rashi doesn't, the question that Rashi is trying to answer, later on it says he could eat meat. So here it says he can't. So it's a question, but that's not right because Rashi usually doesn't answer if there's a contradiction between two places. He only answers the question when you come to the second place. Because the first place, when you're learning, you don't know about the second place yet. You come to the second place and it contradicts the first place, then Rashi asks. Here, this idea that Bnei Noach were able to eat meat, that's later. So why does Rashi add it here? So that's not a problem, the Rebbe says. The reason why Rashi has to right away in our parsha, in Bereishis, has to explain how is it that Bnei Noach were allowed to eat meat. He's moving. We know why Rashi explains it here. As I said many times, as Agam Rashi verantwortet nicht die Perusha, die Schwierigkeit, was wird nicht sagen werden beim Lernen, später die Posik Tereshe Biksav. Even though the rule is that Rashi does not answer a contradiction, a question that will come up in something that you will learn later in Tereshe Biksav. Certainly not of something that's not in Chumash or in Tanakh, but it's in Tereshe B'Alpeh Chazal. So Rashi will not answer it, because that question doesn't happen when you're learning this. And as we said many times, Rashi is written even for a Ben Chomesh Lemikra, someone who just started learning and all he knows is what he's learning. He doesn't know anything else. Only knows what he learned already. And that's the first place. As he keep on going, he knows already more because he learned more. But anything that he didn't learn yet, Rashi doesn't explain. Or Nochmer, and more than that, since Rashi explains the pshat, certainly doesn't have to be to fit according to the way there is la halacha. Rashi has a different derech pshat, and sometimes what Rashi says as the simple pshat and posik does not fit with halacha. So here it wouldn't be a big problem to ask that. We know the halacha is that they could eat meat. So l'chura you could ask that. Why does Rashi answer it here? Rashi doesn't have a problem yet, because it's something that we're going to learn later, and it's not even clear in the posik. It's only in Teresh B'Alpeh, the way to learn pshat and posik. So why does Rashi say it here? So Rashi, the Rebbe says that that's not a problem. Well, Bishaso Rashi is mefarish than posik for Ben Chomesh Lemikra, but since Rashi is explaining the posik to even a child of 5 years old, Rashi also take in consideration the facts that happen by a child. So a child doesn't know anything that he didn't learn yet. So anything that's written later, he doesn't know. But anything that is a fact, and the child has that fact now, Rashi has to take that in consideration. The Rebbe muss Rashi gleich bavor, and that's what Rashi right here. When Rashi says that Odom Rishon are not allowed to eat meat, Rashi must right away explain, as in the Shpetete Kedeiras automatic Benachilas Basar, that later Hashem allowed it. Why does he have to explain it now? Vorim der Pirush as lehirsha, because this idea that Hashem did not allow them to eat meat is bistira to the Metzias, what the Ben Chomesh said. It's a contradiction to a fact. A fact that Ben Chomesh, the child sees. We see, he sees, he knows, he shecht an animal and you eat their meat. So right away, when you learn this pasuk, the child will stop and say, hey, Hashem didn't allow people to eat meat. How come I saw yesterday they shechted an animal and I ate meat and we eat meat? So Rashi has to explain this. So that's not a problem why Rashi explains this question now, that later on Hashem allowed it. So don't wonder how could we eat meat now, because Hashem changed it later. After the Mabel, Hashem changed it for the Bnei Noach. So when it moved, what's not understood is number one, it's a Mavor and the Dem Prat. Just to explain that, why is it that we eat meat when the Torah says that Odom can't eat meat? Just to answer that is genug zu sagen, blaze them din. So all Rashi had to say, the din. And Rashi could have said like this, when it came to the children of Noach, he allowed them eat, like it says later. Or some similar lotion. But Rashi could have just said the fact. The mind nach the dots of Eastern Genoim Posik from them dinim, the Genoim Moker from them dinim Posik. Why is it important to know exactly which Posik we learn it from? Because that's what Rashi does. Rashi says that by the Noach Hashem allowed them, and he quotes the whole Posik. Remes Asher Rochai, Kierek is Sati, and the Sati Lechem Eskel. Why does that? If it's just the answer, why is it that we're able to eat meat when the Posik says you can't? Should answer because Hashem allowed it, as we see it later. Another thing, when they are up to bring the posik, and if there is some reason we'll find that Rashi needs to bring this posik, but the Gedak might sein nor tchilas hakosef. He should have brought just the beginning of the posik. The beginning of the posik is kol remes asher uchai lachem yi'elochlo. Anything that walks, that's live, you could eat. Lachem yi'elochlo. Just those words. But the fun is klora, the Rebishterot matrik events essen boser. That's that allows anything that crawls, anything that walks, you're allowed to eat. So if all that Rashi wants to do, and he wants to bring the posuk where we know it from, that later on Hashem allowed it, He should quote this words of the pasuk. Kol remesh asher zochai lochem, asher ochai lochem yelocha. Anyone that's alive, that walk, you're allowed to eat. But what's Rashi? One does Rashi do two things. Number one, mashmid derikir. He skips the main words. Those words where it says later that you're allowed to eat meat are from the words lachem yelochla. Those words Rashi didn't bring. It is a blaze meramis mitabegemer. He hints it by saying begemer, etc. Rashi says, as the pasuk says, kol remesh asher hu chai vegemer, which means the next words, which said lachem yelochla. But those are the main words. Why does Rashi not say it? And the second thing is, midoch, on the other hand, one thing he skips some words. And he adds, that is meisiv da'arichas k'yerek esav, he adds words. Like the pasuk says, he gave it to Eibush, says it's going to be like k'yerek esav, like the grass. And he adds the word sheitarti lo adam rishon, which I allowed adam rishon, nosati lechem eskel, I gave you also. He brings all this later, which is not important. Just to answer the question, how are we able to eat meat? Because Hashem told us. And you bring a pasuk, he could bring the pasuk with the beginning of the pasuk, and that would be it. So we have all these questions. The mir calls this, so the answer all this is like this. Sein Pirish in Rasha, when ein Pirish is Rasha uisens verrennt von Kama Shailes in die Psukim. Rasha is trying to answer a few questions that we have in these Psukim. Since Rasha says it here, whatever he says is negated to these Psukim because there are some hardships. Rasha only explains when there is something not understood. Rasha has some things not understood in these Psukim. What is it? Number one, was for a Nord hat bechlal zum Idee sein in dem Sipur from Bereishis. What kind of place does it have to tell us in the story of the creation, was Menschen und Chayes meg und können essen, what people and animals are allowed to eat? We're talking about the creation. It's talking about the general creation of animals and people. Not what the creatures, the creation needs. The food is something that they need. That's not part of their creation. So why is it written here? Then you can ask the question on other parts. The Torah also mentioned David that gave him a bracha prur vu. David that told him, you shall be the ruler over the fish and the animals, etc. Why is that important here? Okay, that's the same question. It's talking about the creation. Why is it important, these things? So the Rebbe says, no, those we understand. The brachas from prur vu gamer, yes, the bracha that you should multiply and grow, that's a part of the creation. This explains how the creation is something that's going to continue. Up to this day, the creation continues. They were created in a way that they could multiply. They could have children. So that's part of what type of creation they made. So it's part of creation. We also understand why this idea that Eibush said that the Adam will rule over the fish, etc., the animals, how that is part and it's included in the creation. That describes how the person was created. In part of the creation is that Adam Rishon was created different than the rest. And part of his being different, like the pasuk says, Hashem said, we'll make a person in our image, and the person will rule over the fish, etc., etc. And in continuation, the pasuk says, Hashem Taka created a person. First it says what he said to do. Then he says, Taka created a person in his image. And he said, Urdu, and you should rule over everything. So it's part of the type of creation. It's all what kind of creation? A creation that will multiply, a creation that's special. In the creation goof, you have two kinds. You have the animals, then you have the person who's special. And he controls, he rules. That's all part of the creation. But when it comes to the psukim, when it comes to the psukim and it tells us what the Adam and what the animals should eat, is not moving. Here we don't understand. What connection does it have to the creation? What they will eat? That's one question that Rasha has. Even if you'll find a reason why the commandment to the person that he's saying what he should eat is important here, it's still not understood. You could say maybe that when he said what to eat is part of the creation. He carried the person that has to eat this and this and this. But why is Negeh to tell the person, to tell Adam and Chava what the animals should eat? That the animals will eat grass. Why is that important? Besides, it's a question. The animals were created on the fifth day. I mean, the birds for sure were created on the fifth day. What did they eat till this day? They ate something. So it's not even something new when he said what they're going to eat. So why does he have to say it? But Akaponim for sure, why does he have to say it to Adam and Ish? And you can't answer that this comes in connection. When he said you shall rule over the fish, etc., and the animals. So Mela, that's why he says what they will eat. Since the Eibishter created them, the person, he should be the ruler over the animal life. But they said the Pharaoh was their minachai essence. That's why he told them what they have to eat. It's hard to say that. But nidos is the inhalt from Redu. That's not the meaning of Redu. Redu means to rule over. That's not ruling. That's just responsibility. And all the Eibishter said before is Redu. You will rule over them. So why would you tell them what they're going to have to eat? It doesn't having to eat. That's not ruling over. That's what they eat. So it's hard to say that because the Eibishter said Redu, and that describes, as we said before, what kind of person he is. So part of that Redu is that they eat grass or they eat vegetables, things that grow. That's not Redu. Redu is a different type. Redu means ruling over, controlling them, but not what they eat. So we're back to the question, why is it important for Adam Rishon to know what the animals eat? If it's to answer these questions, basically two questions that we have now. Number one, why is to tell us what the animals and what the person eats is part of the creation? And the second thing, why would it negate to Adam Rishon and his wife, to the people, to know what animals eat? To answer these questions, Rasha Meisik from Posik the Verte, Lechem Niya, Leochlo, Ulechol Chayes Oretz. Rasha quotes from the Posik, the end of the first pasuk, the beginning of the second, and he quotes the whole word because when he quotes it, he quotes all the words. This vav, this is what you should eat, and all the animals from the ground. The fact that they go together with a vav connects Beit Psukim. The vav connects them. When he's mavayed and Pirish Hakos, we said, what is the Torah trying to tell us here? The Torah is trying to tell us the Torah compared to them, to the human being, the behemoths and the chayes to eat, which means like this. The kavana from them seeing from Neshten Posik, the purpose of the end of the first Posik, and the connection to the second Posik is nicht zu sagen Isurim. It's not to tell us what's prohibited, what's forbidden. Nicht zu lassen wissen, was ein Mensch megessen, was chayes darf. It's not to tell us what a person is allowed to eat and what animals like that way. It seems like he's telling us what you're not allowed to eat meat. You only could eat vegetables, and the animals eat vegetables, whatever. That's not what the Posuk is trying to tell us. The Posuk is blaze uisen einzach. Posuk what tells one thing. Madgeza the Gleichkeit am Tzad HaShova for Menschen Chayes ben Gezeres L'Meichel. Torah wants to just tell us. You see, I'm telling you that you're both the same. There is a common denominator between the person and the animals. In what? In the food. But that's all. It's not trying to tell us what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat. Just want to say, look at it, and you'll see there's a connection between the two. There's a common denominator between you two. That's what the Torah tries, not to tell us what you're allowed to eat. The Torah is not trying to tell us that you're not allowed to eat meat. They're motive from them Isar Bosar Alisht Odom Yishte, the source of where we see that Odom and his wife were not allowed to eat meat. Lei Hirsha, like the Rashi says, he didn't allow them to eat. Is Takeh from Hashmos from the Neshten Posek, like Leib said before. That you see from the first Posek. The form was the Posek is Mater Blaze Yerek. He said from the fact that the Posek says that a person is allowed to eat only the grass, is Muchach, but Derech Melo automatically approves as Bosser isn't it mutter. You're not like meat. Like he asked in the Shaila. Like all the before Shalur and Rashi tried to tell us that here we know that Adam couldn't eat meat. That we know from the previous Posek I ever said. So that the Torah doesn't have to tell us. That's not the comparison. That's not from where we know it. But we know that he can't eat meat. The Torah is a begleich meisi, but right after the Torah already told us that he could eat only things that grow and not meat, Torah adds, as Esev is the Michael for Konchayes Oretz v'Chalif Shemayim. The fact that you could eat only vegetables, not meat, we know. But that fact, I want to tell you, the Torah says that animals eat that too. What's the gear? To tell us, to stress that there's a similarity between you two. You're both basically equal. You're going to eat vegetables. The animals also eat vegetables. Not trying what you're allowed to eat. Now that we already know from before that you can't eat meat, you're eating vegetables. And I'm telling you, you look at it. Torah says. Eibishter said, look at it. You eat vegetable, you also eat vegetable. The fact, the chayes essen taken nit no yerek is bosser. The animals eat meat. Some animals eat meat. The question was, animals eat meat also. It's not trying to tell us because you like the animals, just like they can't eat meat, you can't. Just like they don't eat meat, you can't. There are animals that eat meat. That doesn't matter. There's a comparison between what the person eats with what they eat. He's telling them, you see, what you eat is the same thing that they eat. They also eat meat. Good, they eat meat, that's something, but we're not saying that. We're trying to, there's something in you, in the human being, that is similar to them, that you eat meat. And in the order 15, the Rebbe says, you could say something else. They both drink water, they both breathe air. So the Rebbe says, that's not a chidush. So we're talking about the fact that you're allowed to tear something away from its source. And you're allowed to do that, and you do the same thing as they do. And they also have something else that doesn't take away from the comparison between the person and the animals. When the fire is Rasha Maidif, and that's what Rasha repeats again the comparison. Rebbe asked, why does Rashi repeat it? Because he's trying to tell us that all that we're trying to say is that you're compared similar to the animals because you eat the same thing that they eat. They also eat other things, but there are certain, but in this prat of what you eat is similar to what they eat. And the Rashi stresses it by repeating again the words, Kol so now you know what Rashi is trying to tell us. We don't know how to answer the questions yet, but Rashi is trying to tell us that the Torah is trying to show us. He told Adam and Rishon, you should know. When he created him, he said, you should know that there's a similarity between you and the animals. That's all the Torah wants to say. The dinim of not eating meat is that said before, and B'meila you eat only vegetables. In that prat, you are the same. What is important? Was in the game is Sipur Bria Sodom. So Aruis bringing the Ashvo from Michael to Michael Chayes. But now let's go further. Why is it important at the place where the Torah tells us about the creation of the person to bring out that there's a similarity in the food between him and the food of the animals is movement that we understand. Why does the Rebbe say it's a movement? Because if we wouldn't understand it and you have to tell it to us, Rashi would say it. But Rashi assumes that we'll understand. It's very simple. First, the Torah tells us the specialty of the human being over other creatures. As Bashapen geworden B'Tselem Elkim, human was created in the form of Hashem. Therefore, he rules over, controls over all the other creatures. True. That's what it says before. In the creation, he was created special. So comes the Posik and tells us, now that you know that you're special, remember, when it comes to food, you're the same like the animals. In spite of the fact that you are greater than the other creations, is it anivra? You're still a creature. You're still created. The Eibishter made in such a way as b'Michael concerning food. Was in them is told the key from a living thing, in order to live, has to have food. So it's a very, very important part of the creatures. In that, so I want you to be equal to the animals. Was does their mon them odam? What's the purpose? That reminds the person as it is in themselves. Remember, you're in the same category. In other words, remember that you're not a God. As much as you're special and you're great, you're sof kol sof. After all, you are a creature. You are created. And where do we see it? That when it comes to a major thing in your life, your existence, which comes from food, you are the same. There is a similarity. And that's what the Torah, and that belongs in the creation. The question was, why is this written in the creation? Yeah, because he wants to tell, when he created him, he told him you're great and you're special and else. And after that, he tells him, but remember, you're like an animal. You're still a nivra, not a beirach, you're a nivra. It bleibt aber nicht verstandig. Now the question remains, the Pasuk sagt doch for to do, but the Pasuk does say that you control, you're ruling over everything else. So it does seem that you're not equal to them. You're not, you have a special kayach of controlling them. Is Rasha Mamshid? That's why Rasha continues. The Eibishter did not allow. The Rebbe asked the question, what do you mean he did not? He should have said, and was it also to eat meat. Was not allowed Adam and his wife to kill an animal and eat meat. In order to kill an animal and eat the meat, Hashem took away that power, and he gave you the power to rule over them, but not enough to kill them and to eat their meat. That not. So even though you could ask, what do you mean I'm like them? I'm not like them. I have a kayach haridiyah. Yeah, but when it comes to eat, maybe she took away. That's why Rashi used the word hirsha. He didn't give permission. In other words, he took away your right. Like this, you have a right of controlling. He took away that right. When the fire Rashi medayik lehirsha, that's what Rashi used the lotion. He didn't allow. He didn't say that it's forbidden for them to do it. But the adgosha do is not even isif nachelas, because the point here is not the fact that they're not allowed. If the point would be that Rashi is saying not allowed to eat meat, he would have said they're also to eat meat. That's not the point here. Nor if them Pirish inalt from Redu, he's trying to explain how far the Redu, the control that he gave the person of the animals, how far it goes. That doesn't include the permission, the right to kill an animal and eat meat. That means that minimizes in your idea, it minimizes your control and your rulership. So maybe your rulership is not so great. And now we also understand Rasha, reason we asked, Aderisa from Bosser is nor lahom is beri v'lechol Bosser. We said from Rasha's mashman that only forbidden to kill an animal and eat. But an animal died by itself, you're allowed to. And we asked, where does Rasha get this from? What's the reason for this? Now we understand. Since we said that the reason why there is an Isur, we said Rasha is trying to tell us that the idea, the control is limited. So, which means that he said that you can't kill an animal because that is part of that, to show that your idea or control over the animals is not complete. Is move on, since that's the pshat here, that your control, your rulership is limited. It does basitzach dafke if I fall from home is beri v'lechol basar. Where do we see, in which part does it express itself that your control is limited, that your balabatika, your ownership over the animals is limited, is only that you can't kill an animal to eat. If you would do that way, in other words, you would kill the animal to eat, that shows us that is that he controls the animals, etc. You could even kill them to eat them. But if it died by itself, where do we see that it takes away your control? To kill an animal is if you're in control, you would be able to kill the animal. The fact that you can't kill the animal already shows that you're not really in control. As much as you're in control, you're boss over the animals, everything, but you can't kill. The fact that you can't eat the meat itself, eating the meat is not such a thing that shows your control. That's why, if the whole reason why the Eibishter asked them to eat meat is to minimize in their control, he only asked them killing the animal. That you can't, because if you'd be able to kill it, means you're really in control. But you can't kill the animal, so that minimizes your control. The fact that if the animal died and you could eat it, that has nothing to do with control. And therefore, the Rashi learns that they were allowed. The dem is a movement the arichas from Loshen Rashi b'sei Pirush. And now we'll also understand the end of Rashi. Why Rashi goes into that length and explains it. Rashi bavon di bnei neyach is nite, di zu bnei neyach is nite geboren bosar. When Rashi explains and tells us that when it came to neyach, bnei neyach, meat was allowed, ver shver. So it's hard to understand that Isur lahom is beri v'lechol basar. Vet shver vet. So we don't understand something that's not clear. That Isur lahom is beri v'lechol basar. Is gekommen bavoren in the modem, also nicht vergessen, dass nicht mehr wie ein Nivre. The reason why the Eibishter asked, as we said before, to kill an animal and eat its meat, is you shouldn't forget that you're really just a creation like everything else, all the creations. And that Rashi has to tell us. As we said before, we said before that the Ben Chomesh Lemikra sees that people eat meat. So Rashi has to tell why you're allowed to eat meat. So the answer is, as we said before, understood from Rashi, the answer is, the Eibishter said later that you're allowed to, but till now, why weren't you allowed to? Because your redia, your control is limited. It's then the question comes up, how would the Eibishter allow later on they should eat meat? If the whole not killing an animal and eating its meat shows that you're still a nivra, that's what the Eibishter wanted to show. You shouldn't forget that. So how come later on by B'neiach, it doesn't matter, B'neiach is allowed to kill an animal and eat the meat? They don't need to remember that everything comes from Hashem, and you're only a nivra, you're not part of Hashem. The That's what Rashi writes Bereishis and even quotes the whole pasuk where it says they're allowed. When the Bayis Rashi might take them see my pasuk Yera Kesev, Rashi quotes the end of the pasuk Yera Kesev, which we asked before. Why did he do that? Is Meisiv Mafarish and Loshen pasuk Yera Shidarti Lo Demarishon. He adds, he quotes the pasuk, but he adds a few words into the pasuk that you were allowed to eat meat like the grass, which I allowed to Adam Rishon. Rashi repeats that even though the pasuk doesn't say it. Why does Rashi do that? With them died on Rashi. Rashi stresses by this. Ados was meot mate given bosser libnei neach. That this they allowed meat for bnei neach is nicht was is nicht negeya die Begrenzung zu von der Du von Geile Michael. It's not because they don't need the limitation when it comes to food. They should realize that they're still creatures. Not that they don't need to remember that. They do. And the reason they're allowed to kill and eat meat is not because it doesn't matter to them. No, says, I had that. Hashem allowed it. Mitzad demselben Tam. The same reason. Gleich zu dem Tam, wo der Eibishter hat matig when Yera Kesef. Why did the Eibishter allow even to pull off something from the tree and eat it? Shatarti lo Adam Rishon. I allowed it to Adam Rishon. Why? Because they are 11 million sein gesund. He should live and be alive and be healthy. And Bemela, the reason why he allowed him to eat meat, because in order to be healthy, he needed meat. So it's not because, see, we would think maybe if he allowed them means that they don't need this idea to remember. No, they have to remember that too. But nevertheless, just like by Odom Rishon, that's what Rashi mentions here, that I allowed it to Odom Rishon. I allowed it to Odom Rishon. Odom Rishon shouldn't be able to eat meat, even vegetables. How could you take something and tear it off its ground with sores? David allowed it because you need to live. So by David saw and he allowed it. The Farat Losh Rashu is the Verte Lechem Yeloch. That's what Rashi skips. The words Lechem Yeloch. Here it's not important. Rashi is not trying to say the fact that they're allowed to eat meat. The Tama had the reason why. That the reason why they're allowed to eat meat because it's like vegetables. In their stage, it was important for their health. That's why he allowed them. But the idea, why he didn't allow us, they shouldn't think, and that continues, and we have to remember that. But then he gave him a heter further, just like the Eibishter gave a heter, told him to tear off from the tree. Same thing, he gave him a heter, and that's the reason why he allowed them. That's why Rashi mentions Dafka these words of Shanagaya, not to the heter and the Iser, but to the reason why he allowed, because it's just like he allowed Adam Rishon to eat the vegetables, he allowed them to eat meat. The lesson in Avedis Hashem is, what we said before, der Odom darf zusammen mit der Du wissen und Marge sein. Feel that the person has, together with being Redu, being the control, the ruler over everything, he has to know and feel as it is nicht mehr wie ein Nivrechul. He still, remember, should feel that he's only a creature, creation. It's not only to make sure that you shouldn't have gaive, arrogance, which might lead to negative things that might come out because you don't really understand what Hashem meant when he said Redu. The Regam Zayikir, in them hanged up the Redu. It's more than that. Not only because that could spoil the Redu. No. Not only because the Redu might lead you to bad things, and that's why you have to remember that your Redu is Redu, true, your control, but you're still only a creature. But it's more than that. If not for remembering this, you won't be able to do the Redu. It's a condition in order to fulfill the Redu the way the Eibishter wanted. You have to remember that the Eibishter is in control and you're just a Nivra. As the Redu meant as if he thinks that the Redu means he is the one that's doing the control, the Kecha with his own power, then what can it redesign? Then he won't be able to control. But it is Hishva, Nivra, really you're a Nivra like everybody else. You're a creature. So how could one creature be control over the other? Taka can't. So if you think you're a Nivra, you have a special control, you lost it. You can't have the control of the animal because basically you're the same. Only when he remembers the truth. As I Shovitz, all Nivroim are really on his own, he's like every Nivra, every creature. And the power that you have to be in control comes from Hashem. Then you really could control. Then you have a right to control because it's not you. It's the Keich of Hashem that gave you. It's not your control. Nor Hashem it's Hashem. It's a posik in Hekev. But the posik Hashem gave you the power to do whatever you're able to do. But mainly is the emissary Imam Sholoi from the Meibishn. So when you control, because you feel you know it's the Eibish's Keach, so who's really controlling? Because the Eibish that's controlling. Well, Kapirish Rashi, if Yirdu with Gas Hayom, like Rashi says on the posik, the yirdu b'dgas that you should rule over the fish, etc. So Rashi says, yesh b'loshen hazeh loshen ridu v'loshen ridu. The word yirdu has two pshatim. One is ridui. Ridui means controlling, ruling. And then the word also from yirida, from descent. And Rashi says it means like zocha reide. If you're zeicha, if you merit, you will be reide, you will control everything else, all the animals. Lei zocha, if you don't merit, nase yorud lifneim. You will be falling down, descent in front of them. V'chayim meshelas, but the animals will control you. But the deeper pshat in what Rashi says means like this. Zocha means merit, but zocha deeper means loshen zichuch. Zichuch means uizgeedelt, refined. If a person is zocha, which means he's refined, what does it mean he's refined? There's uizgeton from Gai from Yeshes. He's undressed, it doesn't have, is missing the Gaiva, the arrogance and the Yeshes. Nor a gate bekecha for the Meibrish, and he goes in the Kecha of Hashem, is Reide Behem. That's what the Rasha means. Zocha, Reide. You will control, because it's not you, it's the Eibrish. So mainly you have the Kecha of the Eibrish to control that. If Leizoch means that you didn't refine yourself enough. It feels like Yeshus and Mitzis, you feel your own being, your own ego. I feel that Dosva says you feel, why are you controlling? Because it's your own power to control. Demot is nasa yored bifneim. You can't control. You become lower in front of them. Not only if you're like that, then like every creature. If you're looking at yourself, you're a creature. But it's more than that. If you try to control them because of yourself, then you're really even lower than them. That's the deeper shot. Why the Eibishter, in connection to the commandment Urudu, you control everything, the animals. At the same time, he said to them, he said, look, you are similar, you're equal to the animals in food. Because by doing the Davish is trying to explain to them what the Redu means. They told them Redu, and then right away he said, don't forget, in order to do the Redu, not only that's wrong, if you don't remember that everything comes from Hashem, but not only that, you will not be able to fulfill the Redu. To fulfill the Redu, to be in control over them, you must be feeling that you're really a creature. You're like them, you're like the animals. It's the Koyach of Hashem that gives you that power. This is a lesson also in our times. Chazal say, you Yidden are called Odom. Adarika Teir Odom is of Eden. The main title, Odom, goes on Yidden. And the Reivish is Eden. So when Reivish said to Odom, Redu, really deeper it means he's saying to the Odom. Odom is the Eden. He tells the Eden Redu. What the Redu means, you control everything. It says that the strangers, the non-Jews, will come and they will be shepherds to your sheep. Eden will control coming to work, and everyone will work for the Eden. Mashiach will come. So much so that even now in time of Golas, when the Umas are the Melochim Besorim, that they are the kings, they are the officers. These Kenemers, like it says a Posik, that the kings, they will be your nurses, they will be the ones that will nurse your children. And that, like in Hora 27, he brings the Gemara in Zvachim, where it says that it happened even to one of the Amiroim by a king doing something to them, and he told him, because it says that the kings will be your workers. So we know that when the Torah said to Odom Urudu, it means that the person, a Yid, which is Odom, has the power of Urudu, has the power of being the control over everything. It's in them the hero, but the lesson is, if a person will rely on his own power, I feel labor, but the stale is on them, was there is Odom, even if he'll connect it, because I'm Odom. What's Pshat Odom? Adam Elyon. I'm similar to the one above, because one of the reasons the other person is called Odom, says in Shalom, is because Odom comes from where Adam El I'm compared to the Elyon, which means he feels I'm a Baal Milas Gedelis. I have a lot of Milas, I have a lot of special qualities, and that's why I could control. Does he Zayin Milas, but if he feels that's his own Milas, that's his own power, then what is Leizocha. So then he's not Zeiche, which means he didn't refine himself. And what will happen? The animals will control him. Not only that the nations, because he's comparing now the nations to the animals, that they will not only not give him the proper respect, like you give to somebody who's your boss and controls you. No, for Ked, it'll be the opposite. The opposite is that they will control him. And not only that, in his own feeling, you will in your own feeling feel lower than them. For the goyim, for the general concept of of Goyishkeit in the world. Only when Zocha, which means that he refines himself, which means that knows Hashem, your God, He gives you the strength to make everything that you got. So you're not going with your own understanding. Nor lahavdil b'chachmosif and the meibish mit lahavdil b'chachma of Hashem, which is the Torah, the Shulchan Aruch. You behave according to the lessons of Hashem. He goes with the power of the one that sent him. Then you will control. And you will see in an open, revealed way that the kings will be your nurses. And we'll see that even during the time of Golos, till we come to the time that strangers will be your shepherds, means they will work for you. And this is going to happen, but Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu.